Okay, so a few minutes late getting organized because Facebook did not want me to actually go live. So here I am. And we're going to do some work on what's the why for lunges. And whether you are a teacher and you're trying to really think about what it is that you want for your clients, what you want them to think about, how you want them to focus their attention. Um, so having a why in your brain is really helpful. Or whether you're the mover, you're the student, and you want to have some way of focusing your attention because there's a lot to think about in lunges. And it's really helpful if you can dial it in and think about one thing at a time. So I have a few different options that we're going to play with. So you can set yourself up for a lunge. I would suggest putting something um, comfortable under your knee so that you can stay here for a moment without getting uncomfy. And actually, I'll start on this side so you can see my knee better. So initially, our first why is going to just be the fascial connection along the front of your body and getting some juice through it. So we're not thinking too much about alignment. We're not thinking about keeping parts stable. We're just thinking about moving. You're going to let your knee come forward of your toes. That's going to be okay. You're going to let your ribs, your spine, and your pelvis all move. And it's really just about getting a sense of this open line between your knee, probably in your shoulders. And there's lots of other stuff that's going to be going on here. There's going to be rotation, there's going to be some hip shifting. That's all good. No worries. And you can notice how this feels. Does it feel great? Does it feel fantastic? Great, carry on. If it feels like there's some compression happening in your back, you could make your movement smaller. We're looking for the place where this movement feels really good, really nutritious, really fulfilling and really welcoming, rather than something that feels unpleasant that you would like to get away from. And then you can shift over and do the same thing on the other side. Nice and stable here, and then just easing back and forth. And it's okay for your knee to go forward of your toes. Knees are meant to bend, and we're looking for variety in movement, so you don't always want your knees going over your toes, but it's okay to do it as long as it feels okay for your knees. If it doesn't feel okay for your knees, then you want to change, modify, shift. So you can notice whether you get the same feeling from one side to the other. Does one hip feel tighter, one thigh feel snugger than the other? That's not unusual. And again, if you're feeling some compression into your back, then just make your movement smaller. Or if it's too much sensation through your thigh and your hip, just make the movement smaller. So we're getting this nice hydrating, open and ease of all the tissues along the front side of your body. That's version 1. And then go back to the first side. And now let's narrow it in a little bit. And there are two different ways we can do this. Our why this time is to pay attention to the position of your pelvis relative to the wall in front of you. So if you can, let's do it. We'll start by just ease into the lunge the way we just did. So just a nice easy lunge. Connect this time into the front foot. So really get that heel planted into the ground. And now put your hands on your hip bones and notice, or look down with your eyes or both, where are your hip bones? So my down knee hip is way back behind my forward leg hip. And so what we're going to do is level that up. So you want to bring the back hip forward until it is level with the other hip. And you'll notice that's usually going to decrease your range. Part of the way we get into these big shapes is we share the movement out amongst multiple joints. By narrowing in and taking that rotation component away, now we get a why that is much more about the very specific relationship between your leg bone and your pelvis. So this kind of targets into your hip joint, your hip flexors, your quads, your iliacus, the lower part of your psoas. It's really different, right? This is a totally different position. You may feel way more work here and less stretch, or you might feel more stretch. I don't know. Your body is your body and it's going to feel different. The other way to do that, do a little shimmy around, is to level your pelvis up first while your weight is still back over your back knee. So you get into that hip bones level with the wall in front of you, and then ease forward only as far as you can go without shifting your pelvis, without letting this hip drop back. And again, it's going to be a really small range. So let's shift over and do that on the other side. So again, let's start with ease forward. Maybe not quite as far as you did in the first exercise, but coming into a nice open lunge. Plant into your forward foot, locate your hip bones, and then bring that back hip forward so that it levels up. And usually you'll find you're falling over. You'll usually find that you have to move more on one side than the other to get your pelvis level. You may be level right from the get-go on one side and not on the other. And then shift your weight back over your heel or back over your knee. Get your pelvis level to start with, and then add your little bit of lunging, your little bit of pelvic forward shifting, because this doesn't really look or feel much like a lunge anymore, does it? It's pretty small. But again, we're now feeding something much more specific, right? This nice big open, dealing with lots of tissues is good, and now this much more focused version is good. And then I'm going to say, just sort of come off your cushion or your bolster, move around a little bit, take some pressure off your knees for a moment. I'm going to saunter over here and see if there's anybody actually here. I don't know that there's anybody actually here. Oh, there is somebody here. Okay, so we're going to go back now. And this one is stable base, supple psoas. So now get yourself set so you're nice and strong through your pelvis, through your legs. You're going to plant into your forward foot. You're going to do a moderate lunge. But this time you're really thinking about what I call the Frankenstein bolts. You want to really settle into your lateral hip muscles. You want to engage your sense of weight in your pelvis. Like imagine the bones of your pelvis weigh about 50 pounds. They're really solid. And picture your psoas. So if you're a teacher, you'll know what the psoas is. If you don't know what the psoas is, it's the muscle that connects from your spine, comes down on a diagonal to the inside of your pelvic basin, and then another diagonal that attaches to the tops of your leg bones along the inner side of your leg bone. So there's one on each side, and they are the connectors between your torso, your pelvis, and your legs. So you're going to think of the bottom part of those muscles as being really strongly planted, not clenched, but planted. And then move your upper body. And you want to think of your upper body being supple and fluid and mobile. There's no particular choreography. And if you can't really picture your psoas, if you don't really know what your psoas is, just think of the middle part of your spine as being super flexible and fluid. And you could do small fluid movements. You could do bigger fluid movements. You can add your arms. It's whatever feels good to you. And now we're getting the focus, the why, is this ability to hold strength in one part of your body and pliability in another, which is actually way more challenging than it seems to be. And what's happening in your upper psoas in here affects what's happening in your hips. It affects what's going to happen in your lunge. So you don't need to be in a big lunge here, just a little one. And then change over, same thing, other side. So strong into your heel, strong into your knee. Find that sense of weight, the bones of your pelvis being heavy and still, and just coming into a small forward position. And then keep all this really heavy and strong. You get your side butt planted and start to move again, in ways that feel good to you. Typically, your balance is going to be better on one side than the other. That's okay. And we're finding that sense of flow, right? You can think of your psoas moving like seaweed in the ocean, just really, really intuitive. Move in whatever way feels good to you. You might find on one side you want to do a lot of rotation, and on the other side you want to flex. You might find on one side your arms want to move, and on the other they don't. It's all good. And then come on back to center. Now we're going to do another more fixed, more kind of alignment oriented Y. So come on back to your first side. Now it's about the tendency of your pelvis to move this way in a lunge. So if you come back into your big fascial lunge, you'll notice your pubic bones are back and your pelvic heads are forward. So, and you've got lots of movement potentially here through your lower back, that your pelvis has rotated this way. It's followed the tension in your hip and thigh muscles. So again, the why here is not to make a big dramatic lunge shape. The why is to now connect your pubic bones to the tips of your ribs. So you're going to engage your lower abdominal muscles. So we're going to do this, we'll do that. We're not going to do two versions. We're just going to do one version of this one. So we're going to set up before we move. So weight is over your knee. You're strong into your heel and the back of your leg on the forward side. And then from wherever you are, engage your lower abdominals to pull your pubic bones up towards your belly button. And just notice if your ribs are dropped and heavy. If your ribs are pushing forward and you can feel the line of the base of your ribs, you're going to let your ribs soften. Even if that means you end up being a little curved forward, we're going to be totally okay with that. So little connection into your lower abs, and then slide forward. So you're basically bringing your chest, the base of your ribs, your belly button, and your pubic bone, they're all coming together at the same time. And here, what you want to feel for is that your pubic bones stay just a smidgen in front of your hip bones. And it's really common to flip the other way. So again, this is a smaller movement, possibly much more intense stretching sensation right in the front of your hip and the top of your thigh. So we're trying to keep the sensation maybe in like the 3 or 4 out of 10 range. We don't need to be going to a 10 out of 10 degree of stretch sensation. It's just not. For this Y, it's not necessary. We're looking for something a little bit more nuanced, a little more subtle. And then you change over and you do the same thing on the other side. Tuck your toes at the back, find your weight over your knee, get strength through your heels, strength through your glutes and hamstrings, little strength through your Frankenstein side butt, and then connect, pull your pubic bones forward and up towards your belly button. Let the base of your ribs slide down. You're not doing a crunch. You're not forcing down. You're doing the work in the lower part of your abdominals, and you're just letting the upper part stay settled. And then this whole trunk moves forward together, probably not very far. I feel this one a lot. This is kind of one of my major places where my body likes to, like, this feels great to me. This is much harder to hold, and it's much more specific and precise. This Y is a good one for me when I'm kind of doing my own practice. And then we're going to go to the last version. And now we're going to look at your Y is the stability of your pelvis this way. So again, step 1 foot forward. I'm wearing my leg bones for you today. And there's 2 components to this one. So we're going to start with pelvis this way. So if you don't even have to lunge, just start kneeling and then put your hands on your hip bones. Find your hip bones. We use them level to the wall in front of us. Now we're going to use them level to the floor. And see if you can get both hip bones to be the same distance from the ground, which usually, not always, but usually, is going to mean settling the forward hip down. You might be level right from the get-go, and that would be awesome. If you did yesterday's class, was it yesterday's class? no, Tuesday's class, you may have found that if you did any lunging after that, that you were level right from the beginning, which would be fantastic. So now the next thing to notice is when you bring your pelvis to level, does that happen because you shifted your pelvis to the side? So look, see how my leg is cocked off on an angle? That's what my body has done in response to this leveling of the pelvis. So your next trick is to bring your leg to vertical. And notice that you probably did it partly by hiking your pelvis way up again. And the magic combo of all this is, can you bring your pelvis level and keep your leg vertical and keep your rib cage centered over top of your pelvis? This doesn't really even require any going forward. Just this position for most people is a whole host of working parts. Your abdominals are working, your lateral hips are working, your glutes are working. But if you can get into this position and use your glutes to press you forward, your working glute of the down knee to press your pelvis forward and maintain all this levelness, this, my friend, is a fantastic working version of a mini lunge. And this is a really good, I think this is a really good why. It's more complicated because there's more moving parts to it. And we're now really challenging balance, stability, laterality, muscles we don't use very often, but this is a great thing to work on. So come on back over, the other side, knee comes forward. You don't need to lunge to start with, you just have your weight nicely strong, knee and forward foot, and then let this hip slide down. Find the ease, find the drop of the forward leg hip, probably, and this slight lifting of the down knee. So you get that nice and settled, and then you take a look at your thigh bone. Is your thigh bone off on an angle? Bring the leg to center. Feel how this hip probably lifted a little bit. And then for extra bonus marks, lots of side butt work here, lots of glute holding your hips stable, and then bring your pelvis to neutral. Bring your ribs so that they're not off to the side counterbalancing you. And see if you can kind of bring everything towards the midline. And can you hold that? And if you can hold that, can you now also use your glutes to press you forward into this really little controlled working lunge where the why is level pelvis, level thigh bone or vertical thigh bone, and stacked ribs and pelvis. So there you go. That's a series of combinations of whys. And you could take that into a class, and as a teacher, you might verbalize the why. You might say to your clients, this is why I'm thinking about this. Or you could just offer observations of cues they could be observing as they go through their lunge. Hey, what happens for, what's going on with your pelvis? Let's try this, just keeping your hands on your hips and see how your pelvis moves as you go through the range. You know that your why is whether they're getting rotation in the pelvis. They don't necessarily need to know that. If you're a student and you go through this and you're like, oh, I really felt the difference when I did the pubic bone curl, then you could know that that's an interesting thing for you to play with when you go into a class. Whatever kinds of cueing you're getting from your teacher, your why is, oh, I'm working on this version of a lunge for a little while, and it's going to be small, and it's going to be nuanced, and it's going to be less dramatic, but I know it's feeding something I don't normally do, getting me more variety and a more complex movement vocabulary, right? All those little connecting words that make language elegant. We want all those little connecting movements that make your movement elegant. So there you go. That is a whole bunch of whys of different ways to approach doing a lunge. So I will probably be back live again next week, and we'll break down some other movement. Have a great day. If you have any questions, because you're not here live, pop them into the comments down below, and I'll see them and answer them later. Bye.